So if a band release a breakout album, so we can use, I don't know, Metallica's Black Album would be the key one. So everyone knows that was the one that kind of skyrocketed as far as like their popularity. And then over a period of multiple years later, members of that band, of that lineup or the original lineup then leave and are replaced by different members. So 15 years later, it's a completely different lineup of a band. None of those were involved in the writing of that album or recording of that album. Should they really be allowed to be called that band?
It depends, really. Like, there's always, the kind of centerpieces of a band, I guess, And, if you have Metallica without James Hetfield, then I would not call it Metallica.
Well, yeah, look what's happening at the moment with the Pantera.
Yeah, exactly. It is that. Like, I struggle to be like
controversial, I know, but it's happening. But yeah,
it is. Yeah. But,
I guess one of the ones you could talk about maybe would be Sepultura.
Yeah,
there's no original members from that particular band now.
The bass player was in from the beginning, wasn't he? Paolo?
No, second, he wasn't on that first one. He wasn't on the very, very first recording.
So the three famous examples are Napalm Death.
Yes.
They're the most famous example, aren't they?
Yeah,
Believe it or not, the band Ginger don't have any original members.
Uh-huh.
You'll know these, Nick. You know that mathcore band Norma Jean? They don't have any original members left either.
I was going to say, Sepultura we did that tour with Sepultura as the current lineup with Derek and etc. And I mean, Eloy Casagrande is such an incredible player, and he played with a broken leg through the whole tour, which was wow. Even though he said, "My doctor told me not to do this," but he did it anyway. And you wouldn't have noticed. But yeah, Sepultura is a great example. Napalm Death's a good example, as you said. But I understand what you're saying. It's not the same lineup. At the end of the day, they are playing as the brand, I suppose you could say it. It's the brand behind the band. That this band equals this logo, this image, this machine behind it. It's a bit like a company changing employees. It's still the same name. And I know what you mean. Whether that's right or wrong, that's what's happening. Yeah.
So I think the key statement would be, like, for in Sepultura's case, is their key breakout albums like Chaos AD, Arise, stuff like that. We still had Andreas Kisser was involved in it, and so you still have some members of the band are still there that were involved in that writing.
Yep.
So I think even like you could talk about bands like In Flames. None of the original members of In Flames are in Flames, but their main albums were written with some of the members that are in there now still involved.
Yeah.
But the original early albums, which were not their breakout albums, they weren't their biggest, most popular albums. Fair enough, they weren't involved in it. But
what do you think about singers from bands doing their solo tours and then playing the music from the band they're in, which has zero? There's no band members from that, apart from one member who's allowed to play those songs.
So a good example would be like Sebastian Bach doing basically Skid Row numbers.
Well, also Fear Factory, because Bell is going off on a solo tour to do Fear Factory songs. I read in the industry press the other day. That's a thing. It happens a lot. Like, what's your opinion on that?
I'm not a big fan of that personally. I want to see them go out and do their stuff. So I'm a Godsmack fan. But when Sully goes out, when Sully Erna goes out on his tour, he doesn't do Godsmack songs. He does his album. He's got 2 independent albums. He's got 2 solo albums, and he plays his solo stuff. He doesn't do Godsmack stuff.
He's still involved in Godsmack, though, isn't he?
But he still does Godsmack. But he could easily go out and put a couple of Godsmack numbers in there because that's what he's more known for. But he goes out and does his purely his originals. Whereas Sebastian Bach probably goes out and does Skid Row because that's what he's most known for.
Yeah.
And people expect it, so that's why he does it. But I probably wouldn't want to see that as much.
What about Venom and Venom Inc?
Yeah, very good point.
Yeah, because Tony wrote Black Metal, didn't he? The song or the album, I forget. But they do that song as Venom Inc. And it's a whole clusterfuck of situations there. But they're also writing original music, so it's
I think
following up from Dick's point, Liv Christine, who me and Kirk interviewed, had great pleasure doing that tail end of last year. She's got a great solo career, but she also performs live some Theatre of Tragedy songs. Now, I've not seen her perform live, but I would like to see a mixture of both, because Theatre of Tragedy is what she is known for. She is also known for her solo career, so I personally haven't got a problem with that. Paul Di'Anno used to tour his Iron Maiden era songs as well, which fans would have lapped up. I would like to have seen that, but he also has solo material and other bands he's been involved with as well. So again, it's one of them topics we're probably all divided and have split opinions upon.
Well, I think you're spot on, Andy. What I was going to say is, at the end of the day, these bands. Let's pick. I don't know, Napalm Death, for example. Everyone knows who follows that band knows who is not in the band and who is the band. Yeah, if you're following the band, and you're buying tickets to see them, so you already know going in it's not going to be what it was. It may be even better. They're allowed to do it, so why not?
Yeah. I think what was unique with Napalm Death.
Why not? Why not? As long as it isn't absolutely rubbish, then fair play.
But Napalm Death, let's use Andy as an example. He buys Scum from Woolworths in 1987. Andy, you were probably not aware at the time that there were no original members left on the debut album, because it happened so quickly. Side A and Side B of that album are a different band, aren't they? But you don't know that at the time. So I think it's unique that on the debut album, they'd already lost almost all the original members. Oh no, I think Bill Steele was still in it. But you look at the two iconic people in Napalm Death, Shane Embry, and then obviously Barney Greenway. They're not original members, are they? But They are Napalm Death. But before we put the question back, I've just thought of an example where a band decided not to continue because it turns out there was not going to be any original members. Do you remember that band I Wrestle the Bear Ones?
Yeah.
So Courtney, who's in Spirit Box, ended up being their singer, didn't she? The reason she left that and formed Spirit Box with her husband, who was also in I Wrestle the Bears, the one original member who was left decided he didn't want to do the tour because of work commitments. So this band that he'd created with 4 other people that were no longer in the band went out touring with his blessing because he'd lost interest. And they're on the road, they're just thinking, why the fuck are we playing other people's songs? That's Courtney and her husband, and they went and formed Spirit Box. So Dave, your original question is, should you continue? That's a band that had an epiphany. The ones who'd gone out on this absurd tour where the one remaining member couldn't be bothered to do it. And just thought, this is bullshit. Why are we doing it? This isn't even, it's not even our art. So that's an example where they just thought, this is absurd.
It works both ways, basically.
Yeah.
The band could have, as you say, the epiphany and go, actually, this isn't for us. Why are we doing this? Or bands aren't happy with what they're seeing, what they're experiencing from them buying into the band, the brand, as I called it. Because in the day, it's a business. They're buying into this name, this sound, and those members. Some people might not care who plays in that band. They just want to have those songs delivered to them. But other people like us are really into who's playing on that band, who's playing on that album. We get really into it. So it's horses for courses. Everyone's different.
Can I give my 2 cents?
No, I don't think no.
Oh, can I please?
Go on then.
So, I might come across as a bit of a hypocrite here, but I see Napalm Death as what I call a legacy band. It's a bit like Hawkwind, where when they first started, their first 3 albums, there was lots of shuffles and changes, but the product was still Napalm Death. And as we know, Napalm Death has gone from strength to strength. I find Napalm Death one of my favourite bands.
Blinding Live, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. When you guys supported them in Milton Keynes, one of my favourite gigs ever.
Good fun.
I always give Napalm Death a pass because they are a legacy. And to be honest, if they went on for like 60 years with different members, I wouldn't care as long as they were producing good music. Sepultura, on the other hand, I always thought Sepultura was the Cavalieras, and then when they left after Roots, for me it wasn't the same. They still had they marketed themselves as the same band, but I did not love it as much.
I agree with that, G. Yeah.
But then, do you think that if you got into Sepultura after the period where they left, and then you were, that would be your version of Sepultura? And if you didn't know what the...
I suppose this is where grey area lies. What is the point of... I will say that Sepultura, since Roots, I've not had much interest in. I've given it a listen, and it's just not. I mean, don't forget, I got into Sepultura when I was like 14, and for me that was the idyllic. I did a little burp.
You
then.
did do a little bit.
That's the idyllic Sepultura.
No one would have noticed that you brought it up.
So therefore, I can't give Sepultura a pass on the legacy, but I can give Napalm Death because since the very early days, they were chopping and changing.
And I know people who are into Sepultura who are about maybe 10, 12 years younger than me, who know Sepultura as what they are now. But when I've mentioned like Arise and Beneath the Remains, two of my favourite albums, which I've banned from my car because I can't drive to them, so I go through street is they like, oh, what's that? I don't know those albums. It's like, what? They know a certain timeline of Sepultura with Derek moving up till now. That's what they listen to. They haven't really delved that. It's interesting. It's an interesting divide.
The Cavaliers, though, shaped Sepultura into what they became, and then
100%,
yeah. Whereas Napalm Death was shaped by people that now are no longer in the band from, as you say, the very first album.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's a legacy now. This is like Napalm Death could pass the
Napalm
torch to anyone, and as long as they're still keeping true to the Napalm like left wing, hardcore, grindcore,
Nazi punk fuck off.
Nazi punks fuck off.
Yeah.
That's fine with me.
I think the other thing, another good example of like the brand or a legacy one would be Gwar, because they've got no original members, but it's all about the look of the band. So when you go see Gwar, you go there for the experience of Gwar.
Yeah.
Not necessarily about the individual guys, the musicians, and
It's
as they got.
Once again, that's a legacy. They're leaving their legacy because they obviously didn't want to be seen for their facial features. They want to be known for their camaraderie and their theatricality.
Yeah,
and therefore they are still Gwar in my eyes.
And a genius thing to do is to have masked band members where you can change who you want at any point and no one knows. Speak token, like Slipknot, like
Mushroom Head is a very good example. Mushroom Head seems to change members every single tour. So
you're not looking at the person; you're looking at the ego created by the masks and the costumes.
Yeah.
So you can be changeable as you want, which feeds into your buying into the music and the brand rather than the individual.
At what point do you think a band should change their name or be like, change their sound so much? So if a band gets a whole bunch of new members in, and their next album is completely different to, I'm thinking of that Suicide Silence album that was basically an alternative metal record. A bit of a throwback there. They completely veered off the deathcore thing and did this alternative metal record, and nobody liked it. And they had this new singer, and it was a massive disaster. At what point do you go new members? They should probably put this out under a new project name or something.
That's their decision, isn't it?
I'm not familiar with Suicide Silence, but is that not them just marketing off someone else's work?
What's the brand? It's the branding again. It's
the
imagery.
Could be. Yeah.
Marketing. It's because as soon as you lose that band name and logo, you've got to start afresh.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is a lot of hard work if you've got an awful lot of followers that follow that particular
True.
band logo.
But if you change genres, you're going to piss off fans, I think.
But people are going to be having that conversation, so people are still going to be like drawn to your band on some level, even if the people who were into it originally are like, "Oh, I don't like what they're doing now." Like people are hearing you talk about that and go, "Oh, maybe I'll check it out then." See if it's bad or good or whatever. So
there is a car crash example of that. Dave, guess which band I'm going to mention? Celtic Frost, the most hated metal album of all time. Nick, you know this. The most hated metal album of all time, and unanimously people say the worst metal album of all time, is their 1988 record, Cold Lake, which followed up the 1987 album Into the Pandemonium, which is incredible, and it turned into a hair metal band, and everyone, including Tom G. Warrior, thinks it's a shit album. That is the most notorious example. So even though people were having conversations, mate, it was just like, this is shit. This band have betrayed music.
Betrayed music.
Music, yeah.
Good Lord.
So even though people were talking about like, I fucking hate this band now.
Think about
that's not great for the brand, is it?
Bands like Machine Head, or other bands around, the 90s, noughties, went through that awkward new metal phase.
Yeah.
And think about it, if they did that but changed the band name and then went back to Machine Head, no one would really
Yeah.
That name Jerry, it was like, what?
But there are bands that refuse to go back to, like Opeth. I'm not sure if you could justify Opeth changing their name, but they're not a metal band really so much anymore.
But for me,
That's another example of that, Richard, isn't it?
Yeah.
As an Opeth fan, I like the journey that they've gone on.
Absolutely, me too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I like the fact that Mick Lackerfeld woke up one day and went, "No bollocks, we're just going to write."
Yeah.
I can't be bothered with this. Let's do some fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think if you change your style, it's a difficult one to go and change your name, because I mean, Paradise Lost went through a huge change in style.
That's the best example.
But they came right back round it. So I think you just have to ride the wave with the styles changes. There are a few examples of bands more recently, like Eskimo Callboy changing to Electric Callboy. For whatever, I kind of don't know what the reason was, but there are bands that have done it where they've actually been quite popular at the time when they've made the changes. So it's not a case of changing it because they're out of favour or anything like that. But interesting.